Hey all! We know that this year has been incredibly crazy, and with that, we've had to cancel youth group many times this year, and so it seems like our current series, God 2020, has been all over the place because really it's been all over the year. So the planning team wanted to do this recap video really quickly to help you guys remember what are some of the things that we learned about God this year through this crazy season. So let's check out what they had to say.
Hello Lorewood. To start off this wrap-up video for the God 2020 series, we have to go all the way back to the fall, where I talked about this idea of Jesus being a friend, and this idea of Jesus, showing us his ways and showing us his plans for us. Rather than this misconception that we have of him being distant, or him being controlling, or him, being there only when we're good enough, we learned that Jesus is actually a friend of ours. That if we have his spirit, if we follow him, if we, quote, follow his rules, if we are, obedient to him, then he is actually a friend of ours. And this set us up for the rest of the lessons in which we learned about prayer, we learned about what it means to really follow Christ, what it means when we sin, which I will address later. And, all the rest of the lessons kind of follow in this idea of rather than God being controlling or rather than God being distant or any of that stuff, God is actually a friend of ours if we accept him and if we follow in his spirit.
Mike came to youth group and talked about the misconception that God doesn't listen to our prayers, nor does he answer them. He explained how prayer works and that he does answer them, and that he always listens to our prayers and responds to them, even if we don't realize it in the moment. One of the first things he talked about, that prayer is communication with God. He told us, much prayer, much blessing, little prayer, little blessing, no prayer, no blessing. If we don't pray to God, how can we expect him to answer our prayers? He talked about how we should pray. It should begin with God, revolve around relationship, involve confession. Prayer should be persistent, and finally, prayer is asking God for anything and expecting him to give us only what he thinks is best.
Kevin's lesson is about the misconception of God being a ticket into heaven. In his lesson, he used the story of him and his wife Melanie, and if they never sat down to talk and have a good relationship with each other, what would that marriage really look like? Kevin also showed us that God wants all of us, and he wants to be with us, and he wants more of a relationship with us than just praying or us reading our Bible on Sundays at church. God wants to walk with us every day, and he wants to be with us every day. And that takes effort from us in wanting to sit down with God. Kevin also mentioned that we often take God's love for granted, and we know that he always loves us and he's always going to forgive us, so we often use that to justify that we don't need a relationship with God.
So back in October, when Tracy was teaching, he was teaching us about the misconception of reading the Bible. Tracy used the example of imagining you receiving a love letter from, just your loved ones. And you're reading it and reading it and reading it. The Bible is similar to that. But the Bible is helping us build a relationship with God, and also it's teaching us how we can get closer to God. So I also want to say, for those that are doing the Bible challenge, keep on doing the Bible challenge and good luck.
Luke and Kathy Grace talked about the LGBTQ community and the church and how there's this misconception that God and the church are supposed to hate the LGBT community, but that is not true. We learned that if you are a Christian or whoever you are called to have love and compassion for those in the community, and that regardless of your sexual orientation or your gender identity, we are all called to follow Christ. And if you are not following Jesus, that's the first place to start. But if you are following Jesus, then we are all called to live out what is called holy sexuality, which means submitting to God and what He has to say about what we do with our lives. And so we learned more and more about how we need to draw closer to God to learn what He truly has to say about sexuality and how we can follow Him in that.
Overall, through these lessons, whether it be about prayer or whether it be about, what does it really mean to follow Christ? Is it a ticket into heaven, or is it an actual lifestyle? And I think what we learned is that it's an actual lifestyle, and that God prays, or God listens to our prayers, that God is near to us in our struggles just as much as He is near in, our accomplishments. And we discussed some hard, difficult, very weighty topics such as, the LGBTQ community and how that fits into our identity in God. But overall, these lessons, this past few months and even back into the spring, if you guys can remember that, was all meant to teach us, or to show us rather, who God is. And we didn't get the full glimpse. I mean, that's our life. That's eternity, is getting the full glimpse. But we had little snapshots of who is God. Who is God really? Rather than God being controlling or distant or, not wanting to listen to us, or just thinking of us as little ants, little pieces of dirt that are meaningless. We are able to grow in this confidence, hopefully, that God is loving. Beyond anything, God is loving and kind and compassionate and gentle and just wants us. More than anything, He just wants us, who we are. He knows what it's like. He's been here. He's had to deal with the struggles. And so I hope that over these past few months, and again, even to this spring, that you guys can just have this idea and really ask yourself the different questions of, who is God? Not what does the culture say, or what does my family say, or this denomination, or all of those things. As much as those things matter, and as much as those things may lead you, but who is God really? I hope that as these lessons, took place, and I hope that as you guys journey in your faith, whether, you accept Christ or whether you haven't accepted Christ, I just hope that this series was really able to give you guys an idea of what it means to really know God. And so it was a fun journey, and I hope that, it was all worth it and you guys were able to learn. But now we're on to bigger and better things. And so I hope that this was helpful. I hope that, you guys can ask more questions and stuff, and you guys can have a better idea. But yeah, that's what the God 2020 series was, and I hope it was good.